How about 73%?
Wow.
So 3/4 of the fans, and I know like this is not a perfect sample, 3/4 of the fans are very excited.
And we begin the spring with roster news? In this economy, apparently we do. Couple pitchers added to the mix. Zack Meisel on the scene in Goodyear. He'll give us the updates on all of it. Kind of excited by these roster moves, I'm not going to lie, and maybe that'll flow nicely into our plan for the rest of this show. Just talking about the excitement of spring beginning. Hello, my friend.
Did you recently have elbow reconstruction surgery? If so, you may be liable to compensation from the Cleveland Guardians.
I mean, I get it. In the case of John Means is what we're talking about here. Do you want to start with Means or you want to start with Jacob Junis? Because we haven't done either one of these yet. What do you got more passion about? Damn it, we're starting with excitement. You can't do this to me. This is spring. This is when you're supposed to be hopeful.
Let me paint a picture. Because here's where I think, you can cultivate however much excitement you want. They made a concerted effort this winter to bolster their starting pitching depth. I think that's very obvious. I think it was obvious from the start when they traded for Luis Ortiz. I think it's very obvious when you look at their stats from 2024 and you see that Carlos Carrasco ranked third on the team in innings and starts. And you're thinking, how the hell did this team? They were in first place, like start to finish? What? And certainly that played a role in their downfall in the end, but they didn't want to get caught with their pants down again, basically. They wanted to have depth. They wanted to have guys who can step in. And I think you've seen this with the Dodgers are an example, and maybe it's not the best example because they have all the resources to always have more pitchers ready, although they too had tons of injuries and were throwing bullpen games in the World Series. But there's something about like having guys coming back at different times. Matthew Boyd provided them with a well-timed jolt last summer, right? And so you could have Shane Bieber doing that this summer. You could have John Means doing that maybe at the end of the year or something. I don't know. But it was just interesting to me. It was Sunday morning, and I'm watching, and Tristan McKenzie's throwing a live bullpen session on field 2, while Joey Cantillo's looking sharp on field 1, and then Slade Ciccone takes over on field 2, and Vince Velasquez comes on field 1, and you're starting to realize there's depth, and there are more than anything.
Yes.
Like there are a lot of guys you could talk yourself into.
They're
right?
getting you.
So
Yes.
Yeah, and it's because you believe in Bybee, and maybe you believe in Ortiz. Maybe you think Gavin Williams is due for a bounce back, and then you start getting all the, whether it's an injury or a forgettable 2024 season. Like there's just a lot of guys, and maybe you're not sure who will give you the quality yet, but there's enough quantity to be confident that there will be enough quality, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, we talked about it a couple weeks back. I wanted spring to begin because this is the part of the calendar from now until the end of the season, they do this pretty well. This is the part where they get it right. They're always competing. They're unearthing arms that maybe you weren't considering being even on the radar, and they factor in as a major factor. I mean, go back to last year. And all the times in the past few years where we've said what happened to the pitching factory, they still managed to unearth a Ben Lively every now and again. And so that's why I can't wait for spring to start. It kind of leads into my excitement. And again, this is something we'll talk about later in the show. In the case of Means, we know, and we've said this many times, Cleveland needs to be looking for unique situations. They did it last year with Boyd. Now, Means is probably not going to be a best case scenario like Boyd was, but you structure it in a way, and you can get into this too from what you know. Structure it in a way where, yeah, maybe he ends up factoring in September, maybe he doesn't. But you now have another arm in the mix for what should be an acceptable risk here for this organization to take. And if Means is healthy-ish and on the free agent market, they're not going to be able to bring him in, but they do it now. And I think probably, maybe you can speak to this, maybe the organization's even talked about this. I wonder how much pitchers look at what Boyd did this past year and say, well, the Guardians knew how to do it. They knew how to push all the right buttons to help him get there. And I know means a lot of that rehab was happening elsewhere for himself, but they knew how to put the final fairy dust on it to make it all work, and they knew how to rehab this properly. And I'm wondering, for agents and players, do they look at the Guardians situation doing this effectively and it worked out well, and you say, I kind of want to be there because they know what they're doing with these arms that are coming back off the injury.
Yeah, I mean, reputation helps. They've long discussed the fact that they feel like their injury recovery coaching or guidance is a competitive advantage. I've never known how to quantify that, how to relay that, whether it's true, but they've felt that, and I think you're seeing the fruits of that now. They hired Chris Mears, who is a former big league pitcher, and I think his role is to like basically chart out how this recovery will look like. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting strategy. And so you're thinking like Velasquez, who knows what this guy will be? He's had tantalizing stuff for a long time, and maybe hasn't quite lived up to the billing he once had. It's also a question. Like, there are tons of questions for a guy coming off Tommy John surgery. So maybe he factors into this. You know, maybe he never pitches in the Cleveland organization. Maybe he's a big part of their team. Like, you don't know. But that's one guy. You know, Bieber, you're hoping for a midseason return. And I think all parties would sign up for, he looks awesome like Boyd did last year, and then he cashes in and signs a huge deal in free agency somewhere else. Like, everybody would sign up for that. And with Means, you're more looking like if he's healthy and like everything feels good and the data and the delivery and everything looks good at the end of the year, I think you keep him for 26, and you're thinking more long term with him. So everyone's on a different timeline, but I think that's a good thing. I think it means there's always someone else that could be part of this. And it just adds to your depth. Yeah, and you're right. They're not going to go sign Alex Cobb for $15 million to be their number 5 guy. But they could take someone who chooses them over other teams because of their reputation, and it's not going to cost them an arm and a leg, or an elbow in this case, because they're coming off of an injury. So it's you see how it's symbiotic. You see how there's mutually beneficial things here at play, because the team benefits from the player being injured, and the player benefits from going to the place where they feel like they can get back to being themselves.
Then we get to Jacob Junis. We didn't talk much about this over the weekend, but I'm curious where you stand on it. I've been chewing on it for a few days since the news of that came out. It's 1 year, $4.5 million pact. And I know the brief time we did talk about it, you listed all the free agents that they signed and said, well, what if you put all of these together and threw it at one person? I know that's out there. Well, let's talk about just Junis himself. I actually got more and more excited about this the more I thought about it. If he was going to a team that's not very forward-thinking, that has a manager that isn't equipped to be able to make proactive choices on the mound and how they're using their pitching, I don't know that I'd be doing backflips about it, and I still don't know that I'm doing backflips about it.
Do a backflip?
Coming up later in the show. We'll save that for the Patreon audience. I feel like he is, not that he's a very Guardians arm. I mean, you can make that argument, but I think where they're at right now, he's a very fun fit for this team, because I think you can do a lot of stuff with him. And we don't quite know. You just ran down the depth, and I'm excited for it, but there's a lot of risk here in that depth. And so Junis kind of fits a role where whatever you need him to do, he could probably do it pretty well. If you need him to short-term start, he could certainly do that. Is that my long-term hope? No. But if you need him to cover multiple innings coming out of a bullpen, he could do that. Or, I was even thinking about it, what if you have cases where maybe you like Tim Herron starting a game, against a tough top of the lineup, and you use him as an opener, and Junis comes in to soak up 4 or 5 bulk innings coming out of the bullpen. I think there are a lot of different ways you can use him, and the Guardians are among probably the top 5 teams to be able to find the perfect way to utilize an arm like that. I think he can be a weapon for this club, so the more I sat with it, I don't know if it was some copium, just because we didn't have a lot of free agent signings to go over and feel good about this offseason. But this is one that the more I thought about it, the more I really liked it. And I think it just is fun for all the options it could open up for Vogt in this coaching staff.
Yeah, they're going to build him up, but he even told them, like, I don't care what role you put me in. I just want to pitch. And they have some familiarity with him. Craig Albornaz and Kai Correa were on the staff in San Francisco when he was with the Giants. So it'll be interesting to see how they put the pieces of the puzzle together. You know, you're juggling guys' roles. You're juggling certain guys have options, certain guys have opt-outs. So there's a lot of depth, but it really is a puzzle. And maybe guys coming back from injury you want to go slow with. You know, you certainly want to guard against the bullpen getting overused because it was pushed to the limits last year. So there's a lot for them to sort through over the next 6 weeks. But don't you feel like they're in such a better position now than they were a year ago? Now, a year ago, we thought, oh my God, Bieber, McKenzie, and then Williams and Allen and Bybee, like this rotation could be as good as any in the league. And
Sure.
saw how that played out. But while there are more question marks this year, there's more depth. And there are more places to find answers to all the questions you have.
The way I'd phrase it is, if you just took the 5 guys, dropped them into a bucket at this time last year and said, how do you feel about their performance? I'd say, okay, I think there's an outcome here where they're really good. This year, if I had to take just 5 from the group that we've talked about, the existing arms, all of the depth arms, I don't know that I would be able to just pick the 5 and say, if I'm betting on these 5, they're going to be great. But the difference is I'm dropping more names into the bucket. I'm throwing a lot of names in here, and there are guys that have proven to pitch well or have had a nice prospect pedigree in the past or are just returning from injury, and I like that. I mean, sure, it'd be great if Bieber was ready from day one, but as we talked about before, I'm excited to see what a Bieber looks like who doesn't have to worry about his arm falling off after every pitch. Now, I know there's going to be some element of that is going to have to fight through regardless, but once you clear that hurdle and you have confidence in your throwing and what the doctors did underneath the knife, then you don't have to guard against that anymore. You could just go out there and pitch, and I'm excited to see what that version of Bieber looks like. I don't know that we've seen it over the past several years. You have enough names here where I am confident, whether it's just picking a 5 or just doing what I think they've been doing, is thinking less about who are our starters, but thinking who are going to cover the innings. And if it needs to come from our bullpen, fine, we'll add to that. We'll bring in Seawald. We'll have a better bullpen. We have a lot of names that are already here that were great, that had great statistical seasons this past year, and there are names down in the minor leagues we also like. We'll bring in Jacob Junis, and we're just going to cover the innings. We're just going to make sure we don't throw many bad pitchers for as many innings. We just want better innings across the board, and that's the way we'll think about it. That's, to me, is how they approach this, knowing they weren't going to go out and spend, as you said, $15 to $20 million on a starter who, in the case of Cobb, had big risk and is showcasing why that risk is still there.
Guys are going to have to win jobs. That's big too. Like, this isn't, hey, Logan Allen, you had a down year, but we believe in you. Here, you're a number 5 starter. Tristan McKenzie, same thing. I mean, guys have to earn it because there are people behind you who might be capable of taking your spot. I think that's healthy. I think it's necessary, and it gives us something to latch onto, and we can play your favorite game all spring. It doesn't even have to be who would be in your playoff rotation. It can be who's in your starting opening day rotation. It could be 5 names. There's plenty to choose from.
Have you seen enough in spring to change that? Enough of the backfield throwing and good things said about these arms that you can start to alter your plans?
No, I mean, I've thought McKenzie will make the rotation, and I don't think camp has been long enough or widely attended enough to for someone to be the talk of camp on February 17th. But he was hitting 95 in a live bullpen session on Sunday.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Let's say that again because it just sounded good hearing. I liked hearing it.
He was hitting 95.
No, screw the whispers. Shout that from the mountaintops.
95. Can you believe that?
Velocity. I mean, there were even starts last year where he could touch a good velocity. It's just confidence and an ability to do that every pitch and doing it consistently, pitch to pitch, executing every pitch, and not leaving stuff in the middle of the plate. I mean, you'd still see him miss a bat and then give up a home run. Is that Danny Salazar syndrome, or even Trevor Bauer at time got bit by that early in his career?
Yeah, and then the other one is, I think someone asked me maybe in a mailbag a few weeks ago for just like a sleeper type choice, someone to break out. And I don't even know if this guy's a sleeper. And I also, there's like a lot of, I'm not exactly sure like what the finished product looks like, but Joey Cantillo looked really good. Again, we're talking about a live bullpen session in mid-February. It means little, but you see, first of all, the dude is just shredded. And if only we all could have grown up surfing in Hawaii. But you see, like, he just looks the part. I don't know. The stuff was really good. I'm really curious to watch him too, because we hadn't even mentioned him yet. We haven't mentioned Luis Ortiz yet, who is built like a freaking. I think I wrote today his thighs are like sequoia trunks. Like the dude looks like. I can't decide if he looks like an edge rusher or like a right tackle. And he throws hard, and he's I think everyone's curious to see what he looks like after. When the Guardians, if you're a pitcher and the Guardians go out of their way to acquire you, that can be kind of exciting. So there's just that's the conversation, I think. I feel like a lot of years with this team, the pitching, there aren't a lot of mysteries. And usually we're talking about, all right, look at what Arias is doing and Martinez or DeLauder. And so for the first time in a long time, it's like, some starting pitchers we have questions about, but a lot of intrigue.
Yeah, it's different from just knowing who the five are going to be.
Yeah.
And the five are good. I mean, I think we'd all prefer that to just believe in the five, but just in terms of something to look at in spring, it's a nice place to be. To have intriguing arms, but have it within an organization that knows what to do with them. It doesn't mean that every single one of these every guy is going to pay off and be great. And they're not all going to stick around. As you said, there's going to be some that are going to opt out just because they can't find room on the roster for them. And it's okay what you sign up for. If at the end of spring you didn't have to roster everybody because you didn't have that big crippling injury or guys aren't behind where you'd like them to be, that's the better scenario here. And, of course, the pitching distracts us from all the questions I have offensively and what their lineup is going to look like on the right side. But this is all about spring positivity. You're on site. There should be no more positivity than what comes from you because you're there. You're hearing the popping of the mitt. You're hearing the crack of the bat as it reverberates around a ballpark that has no fans and like 2 media members around it. But there's such a unique sound. It can't be replicated, and it's so beautiful. It's one of my favorite things about this sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird time of year, right? Like, it was funny the other morning, Stephen Kwan was facing Cantillo, and like the final pitch of their encounter happens, and Kwan didn't swing, I don't think. And he looked back, like there's coaches and evaluators sitting like in the bleachers behind the fence, behind home plate, and they've got all the technology and they're tracking everything. And Kwan turned to them and he's like, "Was that low? Was that a strike?" And it's like, dude, you know the strike zone better than umpires. Like even he's like recalibrating that at this time of year. It's so early, but it's such an interesting time of the season when you kind of get a little bit of that insight that like you would never. Certainly guys ask for
Yeah.
clarification during the season, but by May, Quan can tell you exactly how many millimeters off the plate a certain ball was. So it's interesting to see that now.
Well, there's something about we haven't seen baseball competitively at all for a while, unless, I don't know if you're paying attention to winter ball or anything, but you haven't seen these players, these names, you haven't seen any activity at all for months. And then even if it's somebody's iPhone 11 footage, and you've seen this guy on the field many times, but it's just something about the spring atmosphere and maybe unique angles you don't normally get to see from whatever video taken of a player. And I go back to the one I saw a couple of days ago, Skeens, the behind the plate, and you see the movement on his pitch, and you go, my God, how does anybody hit this? Now, how many times have you seen him do that on a major league field? I've already seen it a lot. But there's just something unique about the environment of spring, and it's just so intimate. It's so different than where you see these players at any point. And there's still, a lot of these guys are still working through their offseason plans. If it's pitchers, definitely. This is the first time, not the first time they're trying out new pitches or grips or shapes or even arsenals, but it's the first time they're doing it in this environment outside of like a facility with the fluorescent lights above their head. This is them on the field working this stuff out in real time. And it's just so fun to be able to see this with no stakes. There's no, guys obviously want to do well against each other if they can, but there's no real stakes here other than you're just trying to prepare for the season. And it just adds to the excitement I feel this time of year. But even taking that out of the equation, because I'm a psychopath and I'm going to be excited about this regardless, I realized over the weekend just how excited I am for this season. And I don't even think I had really started to think about that or process that. I don't know if it's all the intriguing names in the pitching staff that we've talked about. I don't know if it's just a chance to follow up on an ALCS season. And I know the offseason didn't do much to really launch us into feeling this positivity, but I feel it, and I could not be any more excited. I think there are so many intriguing, fun, young names here that we're going to be learning over the next several weeks that really have me fired up for 25.
We do our best on this podcast during the offseason to make sure that we're covering we're discussing what needs to be discussed. We're not beating people over the heads. We hope with payroll talk and ownership bashing and sometimes that stuff is necessary. I know that there are some people who never want to hear it. I know there are some people who want to hear that only. We could talk about the second base competition, but we know we're going to be talking about it a ton during spring training, and if we talk about it for a month straight in November, there's not much left to talk about. It's hard. It is difficult to talk about not even just the Guardians, but in most places, baseball during the offseason. And that's a symptom of how the league is unfortunately set up these days. And it makes it that's in this town, you're not going to catch shows talking about the Guardians in December when there's football and when the Cavs are, humming along. So it's difficult. And then I think we get to spring training and it's like, well, here's spring training, a new season, okay, whatever, because we haven't been talking about it, because all the conversations we've had about the Guardians the last few months have been testy. So it's really weird. I hate the cycle that we're stuck in. I don't know how we emerge out of it. But a team coming off the ALCS, how you feel is how you would hope everybody feels. But I understand why not everybody feels that way, because it's just always a rotten offseason that you have to suffer through.
I think we try to take into account our own feelings, but realize other people are going to feel differently. At least if we don't stress that outwardly, I want it to be stressed now. When we talk about these things, this is often how we feel. One of the early mottos of this show is we don't want to tell you how to feel. We will tell you how we feel. We might frame it a certain way, but at the end of the day, you experience this stuff the way that you want. That is your responsibility. And I think that leads us into what I really want to get into, which is that excitement topic. Maybe I look through the blinders of, I just love baseball. I want to see this Cleveland team do well. I want everyone around here to be happy. I want this show to benefit. It's just so much more fun when the games are fun and they're winning. So I don't know if I have that bias with me permanently, but I just laid out, I am super excited about this season. I don't think I'm alone in that. Even taking out this offseason, remove that from the mix, I think there are a lot of people that are really excited for baseball to return. Maybe some of it is football related, and they are just so tired of that train wreck every single week. They're done with it.
Yeah.
And baseball, this team had a lot of success last year, and maybe the offseason wasn't fun, but everyone checked out for that. Now they're back for the fun. I feel like there is more excitement, but maybe I'm missing it. But you sent me a tweet. We won't reveal who it was from because I don't want anyone to go attack them for it. But it was you sent me the tweet, so what did it say?
It said that one of the topics that was coming up on the radio was why there's a lack of excitement for this Guardian season. Was that what it was?
Yeah, I think pretty close.
I mean, I have tangible data. We ran the survey on our Patreon show last week. I made you fill out the survey on our show, and 20 questions about kind of the state of the franchise and how you feel about things. And one of the questions was, what is your excitement level for the upcoming season? And the answers, you could choose 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. 5 being the most excited. And guess what?
Can I guess?
Yeah.
Let me guess.
Do it this way. What percentage of about 1,500 responses chose 4 or 5? Meaning
I'm going
the
to
most
guess.
excited.
Hit me with 65%.
How about 73%?
Wow.
So 3/4 of the fans, and I know this is not a perfect sample. 3/4 of the fans are very excited. So I think there are narratives, and I think there's reality, and it's easy to get sucked into the narratives during the off season. But you always say it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If no one ever talks about baseball, and then you say, "Oh, why is no one talking about baseball?" Well, because no one talks about it. The people who have the ability to talk about it choose not to. And so
they're with us, I hope.
Right. So if you're saying there's no excitement, what's that based on? Is that based on the fact that you work at a radio station that doesn't talk about baseball, so they think no one's excited? I'm again, and I'm not trying to say that I was very critical of the offseason too. I completely understand it. I was surprised by the results to this question, but I think it's spring train. I don't think the Browns are going to be very good next season. Is that going to deter people from talking about them nonstop in July and August? Of course not.
Need that J. Jonah Jameson just laughing hysterically meme here. I think it's just framed wrong. If you don't have excitement for the season, that's fine. As we just said, we don't tell you how to feel about it. So if the question was rather, why don't I personally, from who tweeted this, why don't I feel excitement about the upcoming Guardians season? I completely understand it. That's fine. If you feel that way, that's cool. And I would love to hear someone maybe work through all the reasons why, get to the bottom of why they don't feel that excitement. I think it's poorly framed to just say, why is there no excitement? Because as you said, there is excitement for this season. 3/4 of the people that are responding to this feel pretty strongly about having some excitement. I know there's probably bias here because who's answering Guardians questions? Probably Guardians fans. But still, that's the audience that you want to hear from. And if they're that fired up about it, I think that's saying something.
We could also, 19% of the responses said 3 out of 5. So 92%. 8% of people were not excited. I mean, whatever your sample is, that's pretty conclusive.
Where do you think? I mean, we laid it out. A lot of our reasons here, but why do you think there is such excitement for it? Is it just because this team is coming off of a good season? Where does it stem from, do you think?
Well, I think part of it is that spring training is like a breath of fresh air every year. There is something to look forward to, whether your team stinks or whether it's the Dodgers. We can talk prospects this time of year. We can talk about development. We can no one has failed yet. A game built on failure, but in mid-February you haven't failed yet. So I think that helps. Even if you're a Rockies fan, there's some prospect you can cling on to and say, I can't wait to check their box score every night. And I think it's the fact that odds are, even if you hated their offseason, even if you don't truly believe they were one of the 4 best teams last year, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be competitive, right? That they're going to be, at worst, hanging around in the Central. So when your floor is pretty high, it's, I don't know, your options in Cleveland sports talk right now are the Cavs, which, great. Would love to talk about them. Also, don't know how much there is to say until May. I mean, they're really, really good. They've passed every single test. I want to see what they look like against the Celtics and the Knicks and maybe Milwaukee in 3 months, right? The Browns, train wreck, great content machine, tons of fodder there, but what's going to change? There's Myles Garrett, there's Shadur Sanders, there's Deshaun Watson, and I think a lot of people are beaten down by all those topics at the moment. And then there's the Guardians, and because we haven't talked about them much for the last few months, it all feels new. And it feels like a breath of fresh air. So that would be my guess.
Sure.
But I don't know. I also think you always say this in today's day and age, if you want to talk about something, you can go find it most of the time. I think that's why people listen to our podcast. But yeah, I just think everyone has rose-colored glasses with baseball right now, this time of year, with your team, not the league. Which might be headed for doom in a couple years, but it's a time for optimism. Hope springs eternal.
It really does, even when your team doesn't have the greatest outlook. Maybe if your team just doesn't feel like it, if it has a direction, if your team's gonna be really bad, but they've planned for that, you can still get excited about it. There's some degree with the Guardians, we've said they don't want to ever be in that territory where they're really bad, but I think maybe doing it one time, I don't think it would wreck them the way that they think, because if people see the direction, they're willing to stick with you. I think what causes something that they're scared of is the apathy of just being in the middle and not sensing that there's any direction. And I know there are some teams that feel that way. I don't feel that way with Cleveland, largely because, as we've talked about before, I think they have the right man in place to lead the way in Stephen Vogt. I know they have a strong coaching staff to get the most out of young players that I can't wait to see. And for upcoming spring training, every game, legitimately, every game this spring is going to have something interesting come out of it. A lot of it is going to be pitching. But even just looking at that second base battle, I mean, the names that are already involved there, seeing if Chase DeLauder is going to look like the guy he was last spring, because if he does that again, how do you deny him a spot on this roster? And then just seeing some of these other younger players that came up and performed well, I can't wait to see what Giancarlo Noel looks like this spring, because this looks like, I mean, he had one of the best postseason moments your club has ever had.
But that's what I mean. Does doing 15 minutes on Noel and DeLauder, does that attract listeners? I mean, this is the same. We've had this debate forever. Then there's just.
Well, that's fine. Let them ignore it, and then let us have fun discussing it with the people that actually do want to discuss this sort of thing.
I mean, there's going to be a spring game where Travis Pizzana comes in the 7th inning, and who doesn't want to see his first at bat, whether it's this weekend or next week or something. There's going to be there's going to be some dude who just rakes all spring. And you're could this guy make the roster? Should we be paying more attention to him? Should we? I mean, Fangraphs is the latest outlet to have their top 100 prospects list published, and it was an interesting one for sure. And you know, I think they had Cooper Ingle like 53rd, maybe. And Keith Law at the Athletic had Cooper Ingle 67th, and I feel like many people probably don't know who Cooper Ingle is, but like that's a catcher with a really professional bat, and really excited to see what he looks like this spring. Like you're right. You can talk yourself into a few storylines every single day, and you can do that in most camps, and that's why this time of year can be fun. Just have to have an open mind.
Speaking of fun, I want to hear the rest of this survey. I want to know where fans are. I had to take the survey, so I want to hear where fans are at. And then let's maybe just diagnose each of these quickly as to why people feel the way that they do about whatever the topic was.
You know, it's interesting. I think some of the questions were sort of related. Like the first one, how confident are you in the Guardians' direction? Scale of 1 to 5. And most people fell in the 3 and 4 range. So that tells you, okay, you either have an issue with how the front office does things or how ownership does things. So then you look and you see, how would you rate the Dolan ownership? And the vast majority, 68.5%, said, I wish they'd spend more, but I appreciate the stability. Okay. That's fair. I had someone tell me today, like, they were shocked by that result. Because you feel like all we hear, like, one of the options was, it's time for new ownership. Well, only 24% of people said that. So
I wonder how much seeing turnover with the Browns, and you just expect things are going to be different, and we can expand. We don't have to beat up on the Browns. They do enough of that to themselves. Look at other teams that have sold and gone to other owners, and nothing really changed, or in some cases got worse. I think there is some degree of uncertainty here that it is scary whenever there's going to be an ownership change, and we've been talking about that here in Cleveland. That's inevitable. It's going to be happening here at some point. You don't know what a blitzer-led ownership is going to look like. We just assume, he's going to spend more. He's going to be more committed to winning. But what if he also has heads on the chopping block more frequently and makes changes in the front office because he's not going to be okay with just being a mediocre team? And maybe that results in some great things, but it doesn't always. It's just we have the certainty of knowing the organization is run well and they have good people in charge. Man, we wish they would spend more, but we at least know that it's run well and everyone has their job and they do it well. I would assume that that's going to continue, but there is some degree of I don't know anytime there's an ownership change.
How would you rate the Guardians front office? 92% of responders picked a 4 or 5 out of 5. So,
how many hit you with a 1? Or the worst, whatever.
0.4%.
These just
there was some criticism though. I mean, in the comments, like one person said a 5 for scouting and developing pitchers, but a 1 for hitters. I think some people still haven't gotten over like the Junior Caminero trade. I mean, it proves they're certainly not infallible, but given some limitations in place and the track record, I mean, it's hard not to have a favorable opinion. What percentage of readers do you think, when rating Stephen Vogt's performance, 1 to 5, picked a 1 or a 2?
I think 1 or 2 people might have said that.
0.5%. I don't know if that's just to be contrarian. It's just to
I think so.
Screw up the survey.
I think so. I'm guilty of that. Every time I see a survey, I think, what would be the least picked option because I want to pick that? Mm-hmm. I'm such a jerk. Why do I do that? Why do I screw up people's opinions, their polls that way? I need help.
What is your lasting feeling from the 2024 season? The options were, it was a wonderful joyride. It was a great season, but I can't flush how it ended. Or wake me up when they win a title. I think you picked it was a great season, but I can't flush how it ended.
Yeah, that's what I hit you with.
Yeah, 24% chose that. 69% said wonderful joyride. 5% said wake me up when they win a title.
Well, that would be so pointless. I mean, you missed all the fun leading up. They've already won the title, and then you get woken up. Hey, they're celebrating. They're on the field. Don't you feel like you would have missed the joyride if you weren't paying attention leading up to it?
Yeah. But
Sorry.
I said this,
I'm a jerk.
I think I said this the other day. Like, the most common answer to a lot of these questions was, I'm 72 years old. I just want to see one title before I die. Or my parents are in their 70s and we just want to celebrate together once. So, that's certainly out there. A letter grade for the Guardians offseason. Most popular answer was C, 44%. B and D were kind of even. Only 1% gave an A, 7% gave an F. But here's the thing. Like, that's still worth discussing. Like, even if it's, I don't, the payroll conversation, like, I hate that we always have to talk about it. But
it's the biggest contributing
they made
factor.
Moves. Like, that, and that's the thing. Like, Luis Ortiz is worth discussing. Right? Jimenez and Naylor are worth discussing.
About Spencer Horwitz.
I hope someone bought his jersey.
Not going to be playing for a little while.
Who do you think won favorite Guardians player aside from Jose Ramirez? With 66% of the vote.
I don't think there's any way it's not Stephen Kwan.
It is Tim Herron.
Damn you. Now I got to pick a new one?
Stephen Kwan.
I hate you all.
Although one person said Tom Hamilton.
Okay. Sure.
Will Jose Ramirez be elected to the Hall of Fame in the future? 88% said yes. 3.5% said no. The rest said unsure.
I can get with the unsure. Just saying that it's a flat out no. What's that based on? Just because most people don't make it to the Hall of Fame, so odds are in your favor.
To pick the contrarian answer, I guess.
Odds are in your favor that he will not be a Hall of Famer because most major leaguers that play don't make the Hall of Fame. There's a lot of contributing factors as to why.
Where will the team finish in the AL Central this year?
Ooh. I got this for you.
It's that time again. Let's predict the standings in the AL Central like we have any idea what the we're talking about.
Is that Miss Rachel?
We can't afford that.
So 48% said first place, 39% said second, 12% said third, 1% said fourth.
And nobody believes they're going to finish below the White Sox.
I didn't even allow it to be an option.
Because if that's where I would weed out who is being contrarian here. That's where we'd find it out. Attach your name to it, sir or ma'am.
I mean, so 87% say first or second. See? So why wouldn't you be optimistic? Why wouldn't you be excited?
I think the only reason is if maybe you made your way over to the Fangraphs depth charts and looked at their lineup versus right-handed pitching right now.
Oh, I think 1 through 4 is on the table for all 4 teams. I think there are different teams have better chances of finishing in a certain spot, but it's not like drastically different. Like I would never say, "Oh, there's no way the Guardians finish fourth." I wouldn't say, "Oh, there's no way the Twins finish first." Like I think all 4 teams, it's all on the table.
I would think,
which tells you how much the White Sox blow.
Rate them all in variability. So in other words, who has the most narrow margin for where they end up, and who do you think has the widest spectrum of the 4 teams here in play?
I can't even, I truly think there is, not much separating. And that I think the Guardians are maybe the most difficult to project because they're relying the Royals are relying on their rotation to repeat what they did. Like, they probably have the lowest floor because I feel like if Salvi finally shows his age, or if the starting, if Lugo or Reagans miss any time, they're in trouble. They don't have the depth. The Twins maybe have the most variability based on like injury stuff.
Okay, I actually think they're the most narrow. I don't think they have much ceiling to scratch. Like I think the odds are better they finish between like 82 and 87 wins, but I don't know that they go below that, and I don't know that they really go higher than that either.
I just think the Guardians so much hinges on development more so than the other teams.
And a lot more names in the mix, as we were just running down with them. There's a lot of them here.
But they have the depth where I can see it happening, right? At least on the pitching side. You know, the hitting side, like there's a little bit. Like if whoever wins the second base job isn't Juan Brito and doesn't work out, well, Juan Brito could work out. If Brennan doesn't work out, DeLauder could work out. If Bo Naylor doesn't work out, I don't know what you do. And then on the pitching side, we talked about it. Like there's enough quantity to find some quality. I feel like Detroit's pitching is going to be good. Their lineup, like Riley Green's pretty proven at this point. Kerry Carpenter's proven at this point. The bottom of the lineup leaves a lot to be desired. I don't know how to answer your question. I just think so much. It depends. Damn it, could have saved us 5 minutes. But I just think the things that could determine it are injuries or young players developing. I don't know. I probably don't see any team winning like. I mean, the Guardians won 92 last year. I would not bet on any team winning 92.
No, I would not put money on it. Do I think it could happen? Sure, but I would not put anything substantial on that. Other than Tristan McKenzie rearing back and hitting mid-90s, is there been anything else in spring training that's really got you excited? Or just doesn't even have to be performance-related, just seeing the interactions, just being around the team again.
It's we walk in, and to us, it's like, oh, here we go. Like, everything's new. Got to see the faces and the new names and whose locker is who. And to the players, it's like, and probably because they're all here early, it's just, like, the report dates are such a formality at this point. Everybody's here 2 weeks in advance.
Unless you're Marcus Stroman.
And it's like, it's mid-season. Like, Jose Ramirez bought a brand new fancy gold Rolex on Sunday, and so he's showing it off, going teammate by teammate, showing it to them on Monday morning, and he finds some team staffer who I would guess the watch costs more than their house and offers it to, like, hey, you want it? Like, it's just Jose being Jose. It's like mid-season form. I would say, very laid back. I would say Carlos Santana, candidate for best shape of his life, even as he approaches his 39th.
Maybe he was
birthday.
Tired of the criticism last year. Wasn't it last year when they said, oh, he didn't show up as soon as everybody else? What
That's
the heck?
right. Yeah,
and he ended up having one of his best seasons in recent memory.
He looks good. He's happy to be back. He said, Cleveland is my house. He said, it's in his heart.
Good. I hate having to be negative about him because I like Carlos Santana.
This isn't 2015 anymore. We had the Carlos Santana wars. We had the Ahmed Rosario wars. What's next?
Second base war is up next.